You see this? PolitiFact has some shooters on board from their fact check of the DNC. Project 2025 doesn't mention a national anti-abortion coordinator. The document calls for a, quote, pro-life politically appointed senior coordinator of the Office of Women, Children, and Families. The PolitiFact check is insanely dishonest. Harris, Trump plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. Mostly false. What Harris describes as Project 2025, although the 900-page policy manual does make such recommendations, it's not Trump's plan. Trump and his campaign have repeatedly said they were not involved in the project, and Trump is not listed as an author, editor, or contributor. Project 2025 is this is the section we just saw, you know. Anyway, it says the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's abortion surveillance and maternity mortality reporting systems are inadequate and proposes withholding federal money from states that don't report to the CDC how many abortions take place in their states. The document calls for using the Health and Human Services Department to use every available tool, including the cutting of funds, to ensure that every state reports exactly how many abortions take place within its borders, at what gestational age of the child, for what reason, the mother's state of residence, and by what method. Separate into categories, so on as well, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't even know if I want to go through all this. There are so many instances of PolitiFact saying that Kamala Harris is lying, and the reason they think that she's lying is because Trump is lying about his position. You know what I mean? It would be like Nick Fuentes is a neo-Nazi. Fact check, false. Nick Fuentes has not said he's a neo-Nazi, but rather an America First patriot. He has made multiple statements about the Holocaust not happening and, you know, the superiority of the Aryan race. Blah, blah, blah. Nonetheless, he denies the specific claim made, you know? It's crazy. So many qualifiers for such a stupid take, yeah. I was fact-checked on the claim about 2025 removing Social Security. It said it wasn't mentioned in Project 2025. I mean, Trump and Republicans have talked about getting rid of entitlements before. Like, they've just said it out loud. Trump intends to enact what is, in effect, a national sales tax, called a Trump tax, that would raise prices on middle-class families by almost $4,000 a year. Half true. Trump said that he would propose a 10% tariff on all non-domestic goods sold in the U.S. The tariffs will levy separate from taxes. Economists say that much of their impact will pass along to consumers. Harris, the United States Supreme Court just ruled he'd be immune from criminal prosecution. The court did not grant Trump or any president full immunity. Oh my God, dude. PolitiFact is making statements that previous PolitiFacts would have determined to be lies. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's pretty crazy. We've gone over the Project 2025 stuff before. It really does feel like a lot skewed against us in this respect. Snopes has also done this shit lately. Yeah, I remember this. They did this. This was like a big blow up. They did this like 5 years after the fact with the very fine people comment where they called it false. And it's not false. The claim is Donald Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists who attended the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville very fine people. Context. In a news conference after the rally protesting the planned removal of a Confederate statue, Trump did say there were, quote, very fine people on both sides, referring to the protesters and the counter-protesters. He said in the same statement he wasn't talking about neo-Nazis and white nationalists, who he said should be condemned totally. So the problem with this is that he lies a lot. First of all, they were there protesting the removal of a Confederate statue. I don't think there were very fine people on both sides. But also, the equivocation of both sides, very fine people on both sides, what would he define as a neo-Nazi and white nationalist, right? The torchbearers, the people with the swastikas? What about all the people who were with them, agreeing with them? Yeah, I mean, you can go look at like video footage from Charlottesville. There were literally like regular everyday conservatives marching alongside the people with the swastikas. You know, that's the whole point. The point was that it was a Unite the Right rally. That was the point. Yeah, it's using fact checking as a kind of blunt instrument, like a semantic weapon where you can deal it. Like, okay, at the very least, a false rating, not like needs context or partially true or whatever else. That's just flatly ridiculous. You know? It's completely, I mean, what do you do with fact checking when one side of the aisle lies constantly? And again, Democrats lie plenty as well, but there's really no comparing to Trump. I mean, Trump is like in another league, you know? Did a conservative buy the site? I don't know. Though I have to say, it is extremely weird to publish this in June 2024. Right? What, 7 years later? Hey, just to let you know, here's a big Snopes article. Look at all the citation, like, hey, 7 years later, we've previously fact-checked the claim that Trump refused to explicitly condemn white supremacists during the September 2020 presidential debates. Which even this is given a mixture. Benjamin, that's the 4th time you've mentioned it. Isn't Snopes normally pretty good? I mean, you can never trust a corporation too much, right? You never know how much money shifts behind the scenes to influence who gets, like, to publish what or whatever. Elon was sharing that Snopes so much during the DNC. Well, yeah, it's very useful to them 7 years after the fact. This is a complicated claim to disentangle and largely revolves around the sense of the word refuse. How are you going to give this a mixture and this one a false? That's crazy. Do you think these fact-checking sites make a difference broadly? I mean, people link to them. Funnily enough, this is the only article that I've seen from Snopes that's been relevant in a long time, and it's because right-leaning people who have been ignoring Snopes their entire lives because it shows they lie time and time again are now throwing it around as like a counterexample, you know?
On both sides, sir, you said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me, they didn't put themselves down as neo-Nazis. And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down... Excuse me.
I love watching my clip that exonerates Donald Trump of having made the racist statement to consume like a minute of Donald Trump being like, "What, you're gonna oppose owning slaves now? You're gonna do that? You're gonna go down that road?"
Are we gonna take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do.
Okay, good. Are we gonna take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner.
Sure.
Now we're gonna take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine.
Also, keep in mind, Robert E. Lee wasn't just like, it was also the whole leading the armies of the traitorous like breakaway state that attacked the United States. Like, it's not just slavery with Robert E. Lee, man. It's the whole Confederacy. He was literally an enemy. He led the armies of an enemy nation that tried to destroy ours.
You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
So first of all, this is obviously Nazi apologia to equivocate white nationalists and Nazis who formed a violent rally that killed a person to like Antifa, the counter protesters or whatever. That's Nazi apologia. Also, he said there were very fine people on both sides. I just don't believe him when he says the Nazis and white supremacists were bad. I think that he's just kind of like hedging the base there. I don't think he has like an ideological or principled opposition to those ideologies. Clearly not, because he works in line with them constantly, you know? I guess it's really a matter of like, do you think Donald Trump, the known constant liar, is telling the truth when he says, oh yeah, well the Nazi stuff is bad, but, and then the remaining 3 minutes is him like playing defense and apologia for the march and the reason for the march and so on and so forth, you know? Like, that's it, really.
Treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly? No, I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee.
This is literally one of the oldest and most effective strategies for apologia, which is where you simply pretend the group that you're defending either doesn't exist or exists in like a very small amount. This happens all the time. Oh, there were some violent people January 6th, but the vast majority of them. Okay, I ask you this. If a person said the majority of people at the J6 march were peaceful and had peaceful intentions and were merely protesting electoral unfairness, and there were only a few rabble-rousers in the crowd and I condemned them, would you consider that to be like insurrectionist apologia? Because I would. Like, obviously, yeah. You're deliberately downplaying the influence and involvement of the group. You're saying they're bad, sure, but you're saying they're bad. Like, Nazis say that other Nazis are bad all the time, but it's always like, oh, but you know, yeah, it's kind of like the clean Wehrmacht myth, you know, where it's like, oh, of course we condemn the bad thing, but it's not all bad. Didn't Tucker Carlson do exactly that? Yes, they all do. It's like one of the most common strategies. I don't think Donald Trump is doing it conscientiously here. I don't think he's actively dog whistling. And I also think that if you ask Donald Trump, even like in a quiet room where he knew he could say whatever he wanted and he was being completely truthful, I think that he would identify as neither a white supremacist or a Nazi, because most people who are bigots don't actively identify with the bigotry, they just act on it, you know? And then if you ask them like, hey, are you racist? They're like, I'm not racist. No, like this is a reflection of my rational view of the world, you know? They don't want to admit to it. There are some pretty racist people who don't want to admit they're racist, you know? So I don't think that he's like conscientiously doing this or whatever.
I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this.
See, if a person said this about J6, you would identify it as apologia for the insurrectionary behavior of the people who stormed the Capitol, you know? So I feel like it's pretty obvious if you think about it. Yeah.
There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the country.
I think they have a David 85. I just think they're being needlessly pedantic in a way that is kind of dishonest. It's a Rolling Stone article talking about it. Fact checkers try to shield Trump from Project 2025's abortion madness. Instead of fact-checking Trump's absurd claim he has, quote, nothing to do with Project 2025, PolitiFact slams Kamala Harris for tying into the program. That's insane, dude. AP has been biased too. Oh, yeah, I saw this. Have they changed the article names since then? Fact Focus, a look back at false and misleading claims made during the Democratic Convention, versus Fact Focus, a look at claims made at the Republican National Convention as Trump accepts nomination. Have they changed the names? Is this... That's crazy. Do you think this may be a push to not seem left biased by the media? Basically, all capital will align behind the right if pushed hard enough, you know? But, like, I don't know. I can't, like, psychically determine why in any specific instance something like that will happen. It's just crazy.